everybody, and welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. I really hope that this is going to be an informative and enlightening session. So, a topic that I want to discuss today is a topic that is oftentimes misunderstood, or it's oftentimes understood to be something extremely complex, when in reality it's really not, right? So, the topic we are discussing today is magic, right? Magick, magic, right? And there's a lot of, ways to look at magic. But I think what we are going to do today is we are going to define what magic is, try to understand what it is. We're going to look at 3 different types of magic, all right? Kind of like broad summary levels of magic. And ultimately, we're going to look at how magic works, right? And how it generates energy and how we manipulate that energy towards a certain goal. Okay. First things first, this is a bit of a disclaimer. If you don't necessarily agree with anything that I say in these videos, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, right? It doesn't matter. You don't have to believe what I believe, right? And you don't have to change what you believe. The important thing is that you do believe there is something greater, that there is more, right, to life and to how everything works. Because when we can do that, right, we're already aspiring to be more than what we typically view ourselves to be. Okay, so what is magic? Now, magic, I think one of the best explanations of magic came from the occultist Aleister Crowley. Now, I'm not going to quote word for word, but it is the idea that's important. So magic is essentially taking the immaterial and bringing it into the material through sheer force of will. Okay, so I'll say this again. Magic is taking the immaterial and bringing it into the material through sheer force of will. And the most important part of all of that is actually not immaterial or material or bringing things or doing things or causing change. The most important part of that is sheer force of will. Okay, now if we think back to the video that we did where we talked about creation, macro creation and micro creation, right? And how we are creating our own lives. Okay, we will remember that there's this unified theory, a unified field theory. Okay, and the unified field theory essentially says that if we take matter and we break it down into smaller parts, right? We get atoms, we break it down again, we get quarks, and if we keep on breaking it down, ultimately we hit this brick wall, right? Where we can no longer make things smaller anymore, right? But there is the source from where everything comes, and only when this source releases something does it become something, right? So basically saying that you have a line, and on the one side of the line, this is source. This is where everything comes from. On the other side of the line is everything that we can define as something, right? So it's either a force, it's a universal law, it is a atom, it's a quark, it's, and so on and so on. Now, if we look at this side of that line, right, this is everything that is no thing, right? And once it crosses over, it becomes a thing. All right. Now, this is essentially what we call the nothing, right? No thing, and then it becomes something. So when Aleister Crowley says taking the immaterial, no thing, and making it material, something, okay, that is what he's referring to. And a lot of people already do this, and they don't realize that they are doing this, right? If you think about, there's this thing about manifestation that's out there right now. So if you manifest your own reality, manifest the life that you want, manifest the things that you want in your life. And even Jim Carrey started talking about manifestation and all that kind of stuff recently, right? So manifestation is, there's no thing, there is the immaterial, there is what is unmanifest, and then we manifest it, right? Okay, So magic, when we sum it up, right, is taking the immaterial, something that is no thing yet, something that is unmanifest, and forcing it to manifest, to become something, all right, to bring it into being, okay? And the way we do this is through sheer force of will, okay? If you look at the micro creation, as I've explained it in a previous video, and if you haven't seen that video, maybe you should go and check it out. It is quite interesting, right? We learned that we first envision something, right? We, in our minds, we create this image, this picture, right? This high definition video of something that we want to have happen, or something that we want to achieve, or something that we want to make or create, right? And by studying that image, that scene, right, that video that we've created, we can start to understand all of the different factors that we need to take into account, everything that we need in order to bring this into the world, right, to make it manifest, okay? And then through action, or by speaking it into existence, or whatever the case may be, we bring it into the real world. Now, magic works just like that. So if we create this elaborate high-definition video in our minds of something that we want to create, okay, I typically call this, we are creating a mindscape, right? So we are seeing something play out, but it has not happened yet, okay? And it also only exists within our minds. Okay, so it is still immaterial. It's still unmanifest. It is still no thing. It is simply a mindscape, a scenery that I've drawn of something that I would like to come to pass. And then through action, okay, we can bring things into this reality. We can create things. Now, magic works the same way. The only difference, of course, is this works purely on energy. Right? So we still create the mindscape of what we want. We still study it, examine it, and understand exactly what it is, right? And what we want to do with it. But then instead of taking an action or doing a physical action, through sheer force of will, we are forcing it into being, right? Okay, and this is manifestation, some people call it. This is creation, micro-creation, so, you might say, and this is magic. So magic is taking the immaterial and forcing it into material through sheer force of will. Okay, now, but when we talk about energy, right, okay, how do we do this on an energetic level? I think there is a concept, it's something that it's the way I view it. All right, and it falls in line with a few different disciplines that I have followed throughout my life, right? Essentially teaching me the things that I now today know and understand. Okay, so what I want you to envision, okay, and maybe it's easier if I bring a very basic picture into this, right? So let me bring that up. Okay, so energy is like a river, right? It flows from source, and it always flows until it eventually returns to source, right? So energy, we don't create new energy, we don't destroy energy. Energy simply changes shape, okay? But we ourselves don't necessarily generate this energy that we require in order to actually make something happen, right? Energy is like a river, and it flows. It's always there, it's ever present, right? And all we are actually attempting to do is we are trying to siphon some of that energy, to bend that energy towards what our goal might be. A simple way to show this is if I have some idea, right, that I might want to have happen, right? So let's say I am in incredible debt, maybe, at this moment in time, or maybe I'm feeling very alone and I don't, have people that I can share things with. So I have this goal that I kind of need to achieve. And what we are attempting to do, right, when it comes to these things, is we are not actually attempting to change, right, the flow of this river. We are not attempting to generate energy on our own in order for things to happen. What we are rather trying to do, right, is we are simply trying to siphon some of that energy, which then flows towards our goal, right? So through that sheer force of will, okay, by envisioning scenarios, by practicing that manifestation, by performing rituals, right? By performing magic, by reading incantations, by doing all of these different things, what we are actually doing is we are simply siphoning energy towards a goal that we might want. And what is very important to remember about that, okay, is energy flows where your will goes. All right? And the most important part to understand about this is that energy doesn't flow instantly, right? We see it a lot of times where somebody wanted to tap into magic or manifestation, whatever they wanted to call it, right? And they focused on a goal. They kept going, they kept going, they kept going. And then at some point, doubt settles in, right? And at some point they say, well, I've been doing it for like 3 weeks now. I've been doing it for a month. It's just not working, right? And the moment that doubt creeps in, it's not going to work, right? It actually stops, because what we end up doing is the moment we have doubt, we end up putting like a little additional dam into that, siphon that we are trying to pull, and that kind of cancels this energy flow from reaching, that goal that we have in mind. So it's very important to remember that when I do magic, when I manifest, and I'm going to use these words quite loosely, right? That when I set my mind to something, regardless of time, okay, as long as I can keep my focus and as long as I can will it into existence, it will eventually happen. But there is this kind of like time lag, right, between the energy flow and when things start taking shape on this side, right? There's this bit of a time lag between the immaterial and the material, between the unmanifest and the manifest, between source, the river of energy, if you will, and when it finally hits the goal, right? There's a time lag. So what we see a lot of times is we will do all of these rituals, we will do all of these ceremonies, we will do all of the magic, we will do all of these things. And at some point in time, the moment doubt seeps in, our will is no longer connected to that goal and it drops, right? And then this does not happen anymore. And that's a big issue for a lot of people, where they wanted to try these things out. They wanted to actually try and learn, and then eventually they just don't see any results. And then they think, well, it's not working. It's hogwash. It doesn't seem to work, right? And that's kind of part of the problem. And also another big thing is that when you are focused at achieving a certain goal, and it's in line with your own highest internal passions, right? Those things seem to just get achieved, right? Those things are happening. Those things will keep going. But when I'm trying to achieve something which is not in line with my highest passions, right? My highest passions oftentimes becomes a distracting force in what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm kind of boycotting myself, right? So we really need to understand that, firstly, magic is forcing the immaterial into the material, and this happens through sheer force of will. This is a mind thing, right? We need to align ourselves with that goal and stick to it. The second thing is the moment doubt seeps in, we are cutting off the energy flow towards that goal, right? And by cutting it off, it either means it's going to take more time, so it's going to take a lot longer, or it actually could mean that it would never come to fruition at all. And then the third thing we need to understand is that there is a bit of a delay, right? When we are talking about higher realms from which this energy comes, right? This energy, as it travels through this channel that you've built towards your goal, it needs to actually siphon itself through different dimensions in order to eventually affect something here in this reality, which is the third dimension, right? So you might be channeling energy from some higher dimension, and it needs to work its way down and essentially increase in density up until a point where it can have an effect here. So there is latency, there is a delay, right? And that is a very important thing to remember. So now that we understand what magic is, right? Magic is really a lot to do with willpower. If you have practiced meditation, if you have practiced yoga, if you have practiced any of these different disciplines, right, you must have heard at some point the saying that it's all about intent, right? It's all about intent. So if I am doing something and I have a very clear idea of what this is for, and I focus on it exclusively, then my intent is correct. And again, where the mind goes, energy flows, right? So that's very important. And energy that we utilize in order to bring new things in, to bring new things to us, okay? It is a very high dimensional, high frequency energy. And there's a time delay to get it to us, right? So that being said, right, there are three types of magic that I would like to talk about today, right? The first is what we call sympathetic magic. The second is low magic, and the third is high magic. Now, it should be understood, and I want to make this very clear, right, that all of these work. All of these are valid, right? There's no better or worse. And what we find a lot of practitioners do is that they would start with one, right? They would get interested in the other, and ultimately they will mesh the two together, right, in order to create something that's a bit more holistic, right? Now, I'll give you examples of what sympathetic magic is. It's a very difficult to explain topic unless I use examples. So, sympathetic magic is when we act something out in order to get a result. Now, back in the day, when humans were still hunters and gatherers, right? They would have this ritualistic thing that they would do before they go out on a hunt. They would create, so if they were hunting for a specific buck or a bison or a whatever they're hunting, right, they would build like one of those things out of clay. So if they were going to go look for a bison or whatever, they would then design a bison out of clay, all right, and then in the evening before the hunt, before they needed to go out, they would make a big bonfire. They would dance around the fire, right, to draw the attention of the gods, right? Because for them, everything was a god. Lightning was a god, rain was a god, wind was a god, right? And they would dance around the fire and scream and sing and to draw the attention of the gods so the gods can see what they want, right? And what they would do then is they would bring out this clay mold. Really, they would bring out this clay bison or deer or moose or whatever they wanted to hunt, right? They would put it down and they would dance around it, and ritualistically they would essentially take their spears and stab this thing, right? Kind of in a way for them to show the gods what they would like to have happen, you know. And then the gods would bear witness to it to this, and they would bless them with a successful hunt, right? So that was kind of like one example of sympathetic magic. Another one leads to a very interesting part of history. Another example of sympathetic magic is when we as humans moved along now, right? Because remember, sympathetic magic really came from the olden days. When we moved along as humans, we were no longer as fixated on hunting and gathering. We started farming, right? And we would then plow fields and we would sow the seeds of what we want to grow. And people already started living in communities at that point in time, right? And what would happen is these people that usually lived outside of the big cities, right? They would put down all of the seeds, and then they would ritualistically, right, build bonfires everywhere, And then right after they put the seeds, just as it gets dark, they would then dance around the field, right? They would dance around the field, right, in order to imbue these seeds and these fields with their energies, right? And what they would also do is they would have all of their farming implements, right? Like their rakes and their brooms and their this thing and their this thing, right? And they would dance around with it with these things in their hands. And what a lot of them would do is they would jump high up into the air, right? Kind of telling the seeds how high they wanted the plants to grow. And a lot of these guys would hold those implements between their legs and jump into the air, showcasing what they wanted to have happen. And then people seeing this from outside, right, would call them witches. And they would say that they ride on brooms around the fields in the nights, right? It's a fascinating thing, but that's essentially where that whole idea of witches riding brooms come from, right? Is these basic human beings that are just dancing around their fields in order to try and show the corn or the whatever they planted how high they wanted it to grow. And that is sympathetic magic. So sympathetic magic is a very basic thing. It's a lot of physical activity involved in it. And it was all about dancing and screaming and shouting and getting the attention of the gods, and then showing things in a physical manner what they wanted to have happen. The second category of magic is what we call low magic. Okay. Now, low magic is more along the lines of folk magic, right? If you think back, right, a couple of years back, the idea of witches really stand out quite a lot, right? This was a very earth-based, physical kind of magic, right, where they would still dance around the fire, to generate and build up energy, and then they would have a lot of physical things that they did, they would burn sage, they would, have incense going, they would use candles in order to do magic with candles, they would use ropes to do not magic, right? They would actually design elaborate circles for themselves from within which they needed to perform all of this magic. They would have altars, they would have statues and effigies of the god and the goddess, right? It's a very down to earth, earthy kind of magic where, you would go into the forest, you would gather a lot of herbs, a lot of plants, and you would do certain things with them, right? And there was a small part of ritual involved in it, right? But it was very much more like a very physical thing, and a lot of different elements were used and incorporated into this magic, right? And that's why, during the witch trials and stuff, any person that was like a medicine man or woman, any person that knew herbalism, how herbs heals the body, what herbs you can consume to get rid of certain, malignant effects and those kinds of things, those things were very much seen as witchcraft, and it was evil, right? But a lot of it, and I mean a lot of it, was truly based just on the principles of they needed to gather all these different things together, and then they have these kind of basic rituals, right, that they would enact, and they would do things, and they would call on the gods to bear witness to these workings. The celebration of the seasons, for example, all those kinds of things are essentially part of that low magic school, right? And then when we talk about high magic is more almost an academic study of magic, right? It is steeped deeply within ritual and ceremony, right? A friend of mine, I very much focused on the low side, he focused on the high side, and eventually we meshed these things together quite well. But he always said that while you are in those rituals and ceremonies, you are enacting the great drama, right? It was so dramatic, and it's over the top, and you're not just saying words, you are vibrating words, and it's a very academic approach to it. So it's a lot of study, that you need to do, and everything is almost purely energy based, right? So you actually don't use a lot of different things that you can gather and find and then do things with, right? Like low magic, you would go and you would design a voodoo doll, for example, and it takes time, it takes effort. There's a lot of physical activity involved in the low magic, whereas the high magic, you don't really do that, right? It's more of the drama that is behind it. So you would do, in one night you would probably perform 7 different rituals, 7 different ceremonies, right? And your magic was more focused on almost like higher things, right? We are talking about celestial magic, planetary magic. We are talking about elemental magic, jinn magic, that kind of stuff, right? Very focused on higher frequencies, elevated ways of thinking, anything above us, right? And doing these very dramatic rituals that supports what you are trying to do. And what I have found, in my own life, is that sympathetic magic is real, right? In a very real way, standing in front of a mirror, practicing a speech, right? Surprisingly enough, making sure your facial expressions are correct for everything. That is technically a form of sympathetic magic, right? We are enacting the thing in order to improve on the thing, right? So sympathetic magic, very basic, but it served humanity very well for a very long time. Low magic, and I like low magic because I feel it's beautiful, right? You would have like multiple candles, you would have lines, you would bring in your crystals, your gemstones, you would have your statues, you would have goblets, you would use salt, you would have circles, it's a beautiful craft, right? Which is why it's witchcraft, right? It's a craft that you learn, that you embrace. And honestly, when it comes to low magic, magic is beautiful because we use all of these different elements, all of these natural things that we find within this world to perform that magic. And then high magic is, for me, right? It's a much more dramatic thing. It is very ceremonial. It is very much steeped in the great drama of it all. But it's also fascinating because that links into things like astrology. It links into the elemental planes, and there's a lot more. So high magic is significantly more complex than any other form of magic. All right, go try and figure out Enochian magic, okay, angelic magic. Try and do it. It is super complex, right? It is a very complicated thing, and you need to study. It takes years to actually finally understand everything and to bring it all together, right? So there's so much beauty in that as well, and it's such a big commitment, right? So there's no type of magic that is better than another type of magic. Okay, but either one of these, it doesn't matter which one you are doing, right? At the end of the day, all you are doing is you are creating a mindscape of something that you would want to have happen, to fill a need in your life that you may have, to bring something into reality, right? And then you are essentially taking that immaterial and you are making it material through the sheer force of your will, right? And that's why in a lot of cases, when you perform magic, by the end of it, you would say, "So mote it be," or "As is my will, so mote it be." Where my will goes, that's what I want to have happen, right? It will come to pass because I will it to come to pass. Just something that I always caution about, especially for anyone that has never done magic, that wants to start fidgeting around with it and experimenting with it. This always rings true, right? And if it harm none, do what you wilt. Okay, so this is the downside of it, right? If we are funneling energy to get more money, right, and we are not very clear, and we don't really care about where it comes from, you might get that money, right? But it might be because of some bad thing that happened to a relative, and now you are gaining their inheritance, right? And we always have to practice caution and restraint when it comes to these things. And we always have to make sure that what we are trying to make happen will not affect anyone else in a negative way, right? So we got to be very clear, very crystal clear about what we want. Okay, but that is Magick. I think that's a good introduction, right, to Magick. And if you guys like the topic about Magick, we can definitely talk a lot more about Magick. I promise you that much, right? If you want to learn every school of Magick, you will be studying Magick for the rest of your life, right? And you won't even get there. We are not. Well, I don't know, maybe, but I don't think we're Doctor Strange, right? We don't just figure things out. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes practice. Okay. But yes, so if you do find this interesting, if you want me to talk about more topics related to Magick, I'm very happy to do so. Please just leave me a comment, right? If you guys don't communicate with me, I would not know. So there we go, guys. That's Magick. That's how it works. That's how that's where we essentially typically get energy from. You can use personal energy to do it. We can generate our own energy, but it's better when you are simply a conduit for energy and not trying to use your own life force, to make things happen. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Bye.